Parm Saran is a licensed, registered nurse with nearly 30 years of experience. She specializes in mental health and is an advocate for removing the stigma around mental illness. She is a certified therapist, coach, and motivational speaker. She is a holistic nursepreneur helping thousands with her online program, Pain to Purpose. She believes in creating your own destiny and empowering yourself, helping people live life by design and not by default. She has a YouTube channel where she encourages people to choose faith over fear and speak out against bullying, stigma, abuse, and violence. Her best-selling book, Own Your Life, Create As You Go, has inspired many to live life to its fullest potential. Parm is a wife and a mother, and her everyday message, especially to women, is do it. Because your kids deserve a mother they can brag about. She believes you can change your story to change your life and inspires people to do the same. Parm's motive is to help people find their inner power and be the person they are meant to be. Please welcome a voice of change, Parm Saran, and get ready for her show, Grow Your Greatness.
Hello everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Sat Shri Akal, Namaste. I hope you all are doing great wherever you are. Welcome to the show, Grow Your Greatness. Today is a very exciting day as we have a special guest on our show today. This special guest is a very kind, compassionate human being, and he works as a trainer and coordinator for LGBTQ plus community. And he's going to share his wisdom with us today. So let's welcome on the show today, Winson Wong. Winson, welcome to the show, Grow Your Greatness. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation to come on the show. And I'm truly hopeful that you have so many nuggets and so much wisdom and so much greatness to share with us. So Winson, tell us a little bit about yourself first.
For sure. Thank you. So my name is Winson Wong. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the 2S LGBTQ plus training and capacity building coordinator at Moyo Health and Community Services, long title. And my background is in human geography. I specialize in urban geography and urban planning as well. And I also minored in French. And in my role as the training capacity building coordinator, I basically train different service providers throughout Peel region to us LGBTQ plus inclusivity.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job. Yeah, that's a much needed job in today's world. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Winson. And you mentioned that you are trainer and coordinator for LGBTQ plus. Would you like to share some details for our audience and for general population who do not have kind of what is LGBTQ plus, who don't understand it well? So if you can just kind of elaborate on that, that'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. So you'll hear in the 2S LGBTQ plus community that we use the term queerness, and it used to be a derogatory term, but it's now being reclaimed. So you'll hear me frequently say the queer community.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the acronym 2S LGBTQ plus includes many different identities, such as two-spiritedness, lesbian, gay individuals, right? And those are just some of the many different identities that we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Now, queerness is basically a mosaic of different identities of how people feel about themselves. And it's an openness and communication about how people feel about themselves. And this can be their gender identity, and this can be about their sexuality, for example. I like to think of it as an ongoing dialogue in the background of mosaicness in identity and fluidity.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned two terms, gender and sexuality. Would you like to share what is the difference between two?
Yeah, absolutely. So gender is basically how someone feels about themselves in terms of how they express themselves as a person. Well, both of them do. Gender and sexuality is both an expression of how an individual feels about themselves as a person. But
Mm-hmm.
gender is about, well, I'll go into the contrast of what sexuality is, I guess. And sexuality is how the attraction you feel to another person. There is a broad range of sexuality in terms of how someone feels attraction to another person, right? And this can include an attraction to another woman from another woman, for example, or a man being attracted to another man. Sometimes there are individuals who are attracted to more than one gender, known as bisexuality. There are some individuals who are not attracted to anybody, feel little attraction, which is asexuality, for example. So that's sexuality, it's an attraction. Gender, on the other hand, is how someone feels about themselves in terms of their manifestation of who they are in the spectrum of masculinity and femininity. And you'll hear that a lot, right? In the binary world, we look at masculinity or mask and femininity or fem as that spectrum, right? They're sitting right here. In the queer community, it's an open conversation about the fluidity in between both or either or, right? You'll see a lot of people, feel different ways about whether or not they're masc or feminine. They'll cross that sometimes with each other, right? Some people may feel different things different days. There's also a physical manifestation of it, how someone dresses, how someone looks on the outside, right? It's what gender also includes as well.
That's so interesting. Yes, that I've never thought about from this perspective before. And when we say it's sexuality is how we feel, the attraction wise, how we feel.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think this attraction for a female towards female or man towards man was existing before this era? Because we never heard of this when we were little. We never heard about this at all, right? But now this is a lot more in conversation. Do you think it existed before, or what was happening before, or people didn't understand it?
That's a great question. And I think that's where the confusion comes in, right? When, well, we're of course confused when we're smaller. We're never taught about this attraction because we're set into a world that says a man must be attracted to a woman, and that is it, right? And of course, that will cause confusion because let's say when you're growing up, you start realizing, oh, like I'm a man or I'm a boy that I like another boy. What does that mean? So of course, there's going to be confusion. And I can say that, this is definitely existent before our current era. It's existent as a natural thing that happens in all different, I would say different like animal in terms of animals, right? That's exhibited in different animals. Homosexuality is something that is beyond the current social status or social expectation of man and woman, right? That there is man and man, there is female and female. And that's important to know as well.
So true. It's all about the realization and understanding, right? And I guess accepting people as they are.
Exactly. It's something you're born with. It's something that's very natural, and people need to realize then to come out of that, the heteronormative of man and woman. It's important to expand beyond that and be more educated in that.
And to break that bubble of what's normal.
Exactly. To break the conventional, if you know. So
talking about realization and acceptance, would you like to share a little bit about your own journey, Winson? What were the challenges, or if there were any?
So many. So yeah. My sexuality and being in the queer community, that wasn't the only thing that played part to coming out, right? So many different intersectional factors. And intersectionality is a term coined by Professor Crenshaw, Kimberly Crenshaw. And basically intersectionality looks at the intersections of different factors that are within you. So this includes class, for example, race, for example, age, for example, right? In my case, in coming out, intersectionality played a major part. I am of Chinese background. In Chinese culture, as many, many other cultures as well, it's not as accepting. So it's super hard to come out because I didn't know what my parents were expecting. If my parents knew beforehand, and I didn't know where to go with it, right? Coming out was super hard. The realization was in elementary school, I believe, for me. And then middle school was when I realized that there was, for lack of a better term, a distaste for it, right? Like, it's not okay to be gay. And I had to start figuring out my life. I knew I had to set out my life from then on in. So I did go speak with counselors to make sure that I'm on the right path. And coming to Toronto was where I stayed in university, for example. That was one of the ways that I had to depart myself a little bit because I need to find myself and find that journey on my own, right? So that started in middle school. And I don't think any kid should start thinking about their future that far ahead when it comes to their own identity.
Yeah.
And then I have to sit on it for quite a few years, right? That conversation went through to high school and then finally went to university. That self-exploration stage was also very difficult because you had all of a sudden 18-year-old, you're planted with university, you're planted with expectations for academic achievements, finding a job and everything, exploring yourself and really getting out there, right? I came from a small suburban neighborhood. It's beautiful, but it was very niche, right? And then it was when the pandemic hit that now the pandemic played a huge part, mental health, right? That came into play. And it was at that moment when I definitely felt like there, for lack of a better term, I guess, like there was nothing to lose at that point because there was so much that had built up over the years of self-exploration and not figuring out who I was with very little guidance that I did come out to my parents finally. I said, this is who I am. And I cried at that moment. It was hard at that time. And it was hard for me to even utter the words to say I'm gay. And it was that moment of realization that things were kind of clicking into place a little bit. They knew a little bit beforehand, but they want to give me space at the same time. They were surprisingly, at the beginning, they didn't know where to go with it. But as time moved on, they've made many, many different steps forward. It was great. And that was super surprising for me. So at the beginning, it was really, really difficult because it's that build up, right? Like since you're a kid, you don't know where to go with that information. You're trying to figure yourself out all on your own. And then that's when the moment hits, right? And then you start building that relationship. Now, can I say that my experience is the same? Everyone else's experience is the same with mine? Absolutely not. There are people with so many different journeys and coming out. Some people with better outcomes than mine. There are some people who exact same outcomes. There are people who have outcomes that weren't as great. And those are huge, huge steps for them as well. But at the same time, it's very difficult at this, So yeah, all it is to say that there's so many different factors, and this can come from a very young age of needing to learn how to do this all on your own because there are no resources for you at the beginning.
And then there are expectations from parents and society and culture.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
Absolutely. I've noticed that some conversations have stopped in terms of specific topics. Not whole entire conversations, specific topics about dating life, for example, that stopped, right? And I think I've said this before, but it's like, it's different when you look back, when you're older, when you look back, you're looking at how there are so many, when you're younger that boys and girls can hold hands, but you as, a person holding hands with another person of the same gender and sex, that you missed out on that part and that, you weren't who you were. You couldn't be who you are as a person, and you're basically living a double life, right? And that's something that I believe many people can express as well, is that you're living a double life. Is there anything you can do about it? Sure, but is it supremely hard and difficult? Yes, absolutely.
And that living double life, inside you're feeling something else, and outside you have to show something else to the world. I believe it affects mental health.
Absolutely.
Have you come across many people of LGBTQ community who has mental health challenges due to this part of their life?
That's a very good question. I think that now I can't absolutely say because I'm not a licensed professional in any sense or anything like that. But can I say that there are mental health challenges that the general queer community has encountered? Absolutely. Many of which are not shown on the outside, right? So, I could say, for example, there were 5 people who I met who encountered a mental health challenge, but for those who don't show it, there are probably so many, many, many more people who encounter that challenge. Depression being one of them is a huge one. And I think that one's the one that creeps up on you when you least expect it, or it hits you at different times when you least expect it. For me, it continues to hit me at times that I least expect it, or that I'm like, please stop impacting me, and it just continues to.
And I believe anxiety can be the other one because you're constantly thinking about your future, how I'm going to do it, how I'm going to say it, what I'm going to achieve, right? So that's when anxiety creeps in.
I realized that I probably had anxiety because I always found myself holding my breath. And the reason why I think was because the term of success, right? I've always been told, now that you're out, that you need to minimize who you are because it's, your queerness can diminish your success in life, which in part in the heteronormative society, right? If we're sticking straight to that, absolutely it can. But at the end of the day, there's so many queer people out there who have made so many beautiful successes. We've made so many beautiful successes since the 80s, for example. Well, it is to say that, there's always this idea that queer people cannot succeed and that you need to diminish your queerness so that you can have a higher chance of success. And I understand where it's coming from. I believe I do. I know where that's coming from. But to say that, does that impact me in terms of how I determine my own future? And does that impact my mental health? Absolutely. It's always at the back of my mind, that fear of failure, the fear of not living up to certain expectations and standards. And at the end of the day, my own standards, it grew up to be. Used to be my parents, and now it's, living up to my own standards, and the anxiety of holding in my breath all the time. That's how I termed it all the time. It felt like I was holding in my breath 24/7, not knowing when to let go. And if I do a little bit, something comes up and I have to, breathe in a little bit. And that was always the hardest part.
And it's that constant battle between trying to compensate. You think your identity is such that you have to compensate that by achieving something else more.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You have to one up the other. Exactly. And the worst part is that you're battling yourself. You realize that later. And some people may realize it then, but I think for me, I've realized it later that I was battling myself the entire time, trying to top myself over and over again. That fear of constant failure, it's heartbreaking.
It is. I mean, fear of anything is heartbreaking, right? Living in constant fear, that's not how human beings should be living, right? We should be allowed to live our lives the way we want.
Exactly. I mean, no one should be thinking thinking about the future from middle school or elementary school, To say it's heartbreaking, I think it's an understatement. So,
right.
Yeah.
Did you face any challenges in terms of job and career?
That's a very good question. Well, my current at Moyo Health and Community Services, it's been one of the most supportive places I've been in. The colleagues I work with, they've been an absolute blessing. In a very general sense, I myself have encountered certain opportunities that have been great in its own, but to say that there has not been any challenges, I don't think that would be fair to say.
Right.
I've been blessed, but at the same time, there have been certain challenges that I've had to face.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just going back to the schooling, and from middle school, you had this sensation, right? Did you experience any bullying because of that in the school?
That's a very good question. Going back, I'm trying to recount my memory now.
Right.
Did I encounter any bullying? I think, as I've said earlier, I lived in a very niche community.
Right.
So it was think of the picture perfect, sun glowing, the trees are parting, beautiful community. Think of it like that. So I can't say that I've encountered any explicit. Actually, my high school, for example, has been very supportive of my endeavors and my interests of activity, like school activities and clubs, and what participation I've given. I don't think I've encountered any in high school. And considering elementary and middle school, I think that there were very general bullying, but I can't recount any experiences at the moment.
That's the thing.
Yeah, but then again, right? Like I can't say that for my experiences that this is what's happening with every other queer person, because it's absolutely not true, right? As I've kind of indicated, the geography of where I lived impacts who you are and how and who you can be as a person. The demographic around you, the geography around you, it impacts how out you can be as a person. And I know that I've been privileged enough to have one of those circumstances, but for many, many queer persons, it's absolutely not the same.
Right. And that was the reason that I asked this question, because I have come across so many people telling me that they were bullied because of the way they expressed themselves or because of the way they felt. So that's very heartbreaking.
Oh, absolutely. People will be pinpointed with different names, different derogatory terms, such as, for example, queer. And have I been called that before? Yes, I have. There are many other terms that have also been used, that have also been used against me and many to other queer persons out there. And not just growing up, right? Even when I say even after growing up, I mean after 18. That there are people who continue to do that. Who continue to shout from across the street, for example, when you're holding hands with your partner. That's a whole nother fear of its own, right? Even holding your hands with your partner. So to say that it happens across different stages of your life is a huge understatement too. You will have that feeling. As a queer person, I can't speak for all, but many people will have that feeling of I need to hide who I am, or I have to live in the fear of being discriminated for who I am out in public. Yeah.
So recently I was reading, I don't watch news, but sometimes
Mhm.
the Apple News comes on your phone. And
Yes.
this came to my attention that in some countries, it's still illegal to even say that you are homosexual.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that there's still a lot of education that's needed in terms
Right.
of queerness, and with that education, it means an openness to the reality that we live in. Right?
Mhm.
We're set in a heteronormative world of yes and no. When I say yes and no, I mean left and right, or man or woman. For example, if I'm alluding that correctly, it's to say that we live in such a binary that it's hard for people to come out of that binary, but it means to, expand beyond that and to be a little more open in terms of finding out what's going on. What's the reality that we live in. That's how I think of it, in terms of, what's been going on in other in a global setting.
Right. So it's just
Yeah.
the lack of education.
Education, but openness as well. Being
Openness
able
and
to be more
awareness.
open, that's super important. Yeah.
Right. And Vincent, there are many people who will be listening to you on this through this show, and they might be thinking that I feel something different, and how should I come out about it? How should I explore my gender, my sexuality, or how should I kind of even accept myself? Do you have any kind of tips or any ideas or suggestions for those people?
Well, that's a good one. I guess this could also be synonymous of, if I could teach myself, what would I teach if I was younger? Trust yourself. That's one thing that I continue to battle with at the same time, to trust your instinct, to get out there and to learn about who you are, because who you are is an amazing, beautiful thing. And there are going to be a lot of challenges behind you. Now that I look back at it, there were so many challenges that I now continue to realize as I move forward into my adulthood, right? But looking back into it, there were challenges I didn't know that were challenges that I inadvertently faced. But to trust your instinct and to continue moving forward, exploring that, have conversations, be open, learn more, and by protecting yourself at any case, right? Whether or not that's in health, that's in your own, exploration, your own future, right? Protecting yourself, trusting yourself, and guiding yourself. Stay close to people around you as well, right? And that comes with instinct, because no relationship, whether it's a friendship or relationship or whatever relationship it is, try to grow and develop that. But for those who that you can trust, stick with them and keep them close to you. That's super important as well. Yeah, and you'll know who those people are.
Right. Yes, yes. As in general in life, right? We know. Yeah. And where, if they need more information about this or more help, where should they go?
I think, oof, and I'm speaking 18 and up solely here, just
Mhm.
because that's where I started my own self-exploration, is to ask questions when there is an opportunity. So for example, there are organizations out there to ask questions and start exploring the avenue. At post-secondary, there are clubs, right? Connections, network a little bit, start from there. You never know what opportunities lie there. In terms of sexual health, for example,
Right.
that one's a big one, because when we're kids, or when I say when we're kids, I mean like in high school, I'm sure we're not taught that in elementary and middle school either, but in high school specifically, you get an A, you pass, and that's it.
Right.
That's not how life works. That's not how life works. For example, different sexual health challenges will stick with you throughout your adulthood, whether or not they directly impact you or directly impact someone who's right beside you, for example, right? So in terms of that, don't be afraid to ask questions and be explicit when you're asking them in a healthcare setting. So you're talking to a practitioner, ask questions and, ask, for example, what are the tests that I need to cover all STDBIs, for example?
Mhm.
How do I best protect myself? There's a medication called pre-exposure prophylaxis. What is that? If they don't know the answer, they'll always be able to refer you to someone who has the answers. Um,
Right.
and if not, then it goes back to that comment I made about networking and really finding resources out there to find those who do know the answers. Never be afraid to ask questions.
Right. Don't hide, don't shy, ask questions, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Remember to just protect yourself. Trust your gut instinct. If you really want to know something, do not be afraid to ask someone, even in private. It's okay to do that.
That's awesome. That's brilliant, Winson. Thank you so much. And last question, what will be your message to the world in general, especially for people who are trying to understand LGBTQ+? What's your message of greatness for them?
To the world.
How should they do to help the LGBTQ+?
Be open-minded, continue being open-minded. That's how people flourish in a very general setting. And I know that I'm giving this sounds like a very general, oh, well, then everyone be open-minded, but it goes back to square one. It goes back to the foundations of, any type of communications openness, right? If you're open as a person and you continue being open, that's when you start laying that identity, just identity in general, out on the floor, whatever identity that is, right? And that can be intersectional identities, as we were talking about earlier, right? How that impacts a single person.
Right.
So being able to do that, being open, being mindful, if you yourself don't know answers, and no one's a perfect human being, to always ask questions. Same thing, ask questions, say, hey, I'm not understanding this. Even if you think, oh, this sounds like an ignorant question, it may or may not be. I'm not the judge of that. But is it bad to ask? No, because when you ask, that's how you will understand and come to know more things. So being open and asking questions are two very fundamentals to your own development and the other person's development. And I highly encourage that.
That's great. So lovely. Thank you so much, Winson. And I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. And you are beautiful person inside out. And
thank you.
I wish you all the happiness and success. And thanks again for coming up.
Thank you so much for inviting me here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Winson. You take care.
For sure. You too. You as well.
Thank you.